Hello everyone, my name is Clive Swansborn. Welcome to Piano Insights. Today we're going to be looking at Clair de Lune by Debussy. This is one of the movements of a four-movement suite called Suite Bergamasque, and it's taken singly very often out of context and just played on its own, because it is really the crown jewel of the suite, and in fact it's a crown jewel amongst all of Debussy's writing. Considering it's an early piece, that's quite a distinguishing fact about this piece. He managed to sort of hit the jackpot and create magic. And it's not in his fully impressionist style. It was early enough that it was still sort of pre-impressionist. He hadn't started with his new harmonic style that he more or less developed himself, although he took the lead from people such as Mussorgsky, who were using modal and folk oriented harmonies and so forth. Debussy made them his own though. I mean, if you play a string of sevenths, for example, like this, without resolving them, it immediately sounds like Debussy. And it was what was called actually non-functional harmony. When you didn't resolve a dominant seventh and you just used another dominant seventh right after it, the chords became independent from each other in a functional way. They redefined themselves in this way. The seventh became a thing in itself that didn't rely on what it was supposed to do in an already decided upon harmonic construct. And so he was very revolutionary in that sense. At this stage he hadn't got there yet. I mean, he was still experimenting vastly, but what he does do in this piece, even though it is still in the basic harmonic frameworks that he'd been brought up with, he creates a world of his own, which is already Debussy. It doesn't sound like anybody else, even though it doesn't have those later hallmarks of his style. So let's go in. Clair de Lune obviously means moonlight. Now, as opposed to the Beethoven Moonlight Sonata, in which Beethoven had no idea or wasn't thinking about moonlight at all, and it was appended to the piece much later on. Debussy did mean this to mean moonlight. He opens the piece, which he marks andante très expressif, which means very expressive, and con sordino, which in this context means with the soft pedal. Pedal down first. Now, a lot of things here to mention. I think that it shouldn't all be pedalled uniformly, because if you do that, it gets too blurry. There's a definite feeling of a melodic line here, which gets blurred if you use pedal. So here, definitely, let's get the left pedal down. Instantly there, I think it sounds better without pedal. If you go, you can do it, but you can do it here also, I suppose. What I prefer here is more of a soloistic kind of effect, so that when you actually get the full pedaled measures, where he marks chords in the bass, which actually should last for the entire measure over a measure of sheerly one chord, which is in that case D flat major. In this case, G flat major. Then you get the full sonority of the piano. But when there's a melodic line going on in the opening parts of this piece, I think let's do away with the pedal and use it merely for keeping the legato at the ends of the measures. So we got nice and clear there, like two flutes. Then stick the pedal down at the very end to join. You don't actually need to here. You don't need to, you can just go straight through legato in both fingers. And here too. So we've hardly had any pedal yet. Here we do need it, I think, because we're going from here to here. Here again. Put the pedal down there because we're repeating the E flat here. And then here we're doing a new thumb here, so again, you can do these little transitional pedals at the end of the measures, and sometimes just before changing chord. You can stick the pedal in order to make sure that there's no gap in the legato. Even if you didn't do that, it would be unusual for anyone to hear the gap, but this, not even I could really hear, but my ear tells me to put the pedal down here, even though it's not strictly necessary. But here you have to lift up, so there again, I think it's safe to go that's before you play that, to put the pedal down quickly and then lift it up again. So we're doing joining pedals, not just very short joining pedals, so that between the big harmony changes, well, they're not big, but between the harmony changes, where there's a possibility of there being a lack of beautiful legato, just stick down the pedal for a split second to get that legato. The other thing about this, I think, is, or two things, the use of rubato. Now, he doesn't mark rubato yet. He uses the word rubato on the next page. But I still think that it's very necessary to bring the music to life, to use some rubato in this flute. It's almost like an improvisation on like a Pan playing his flute. It looks towards the Prelude à l'après-midi d'un faune. It reminds me a little bit of that. Rather than dull. That was in strict tempo, and I think that's very uninteresting. The other thing also is to think of shaping it, I think, towards the middle here. Even though the whole thing is going down, it's more interesting to find a focal point where you sort of climax. You don't really do a big crescendo, but the feeling of expanding towards that place and then coming off it and sinking into the beautiful D flat cadence which comes at the end. Let me try and show what I mean. And then coming off it. So a little crescendo to this point, and then maybe that should be the crux. And diminuendo here. Now, teaching this piece or learning it for people that are learning it, there's almost always a tendency to rush the beats where nothing is happening, and this is a big problem and requires a lot of inner training for the ear, inner training of rhythm for the ear. Very good idea to use metronome, of course, before we put all these rubato things in, to get a real sense of what the rhythm is. Immediately we have the end of a triplet and a tie. So we've got to be counting eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, silence 2, 3. And not rush it, you see. There's a tendency to want to rush to the next measure because there's nothing happening. So keep counting the threes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, what are you going to do there? I think that really the easiest thing to do here is to stop counting threes and just count the one of each beat. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or 1, 1, or even go just 1, 2, 1, 2. You see, because it's actually easier than 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3. Trying to stick it in on the and is more complicated. So just take the main beats, listen to the main beats without counting the threes on these occasions. The place to count the threes are on the longer notes where nothing's happening. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 1. 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's what I'd recommend there. The main thing is to realize that these are duplets here, they're longer, so not. Very often kids who are learning this just rush that and don't realize that those are quite a bit longer. So 1, 1, 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So to get the idea of the main beats is very important. And when you get a duplet, to just count the main beats and play even a couple of even notes between them. And if there's a problem with this tie here, because, I mean, it would have been easier if he hadn't tied there, if he'd actually had a repeated chord there. But that is nonetheless a good way of practicing it, to get the beat solidly into your ear. 1. So if you're having any trouble with that at all, that's what I'd recommend there. And then you get rid of the repeated chord. You just get rid of it, and you have a tie in there, and the beat will be there in your imagination. Now, when you get to the beautiful D-flat cadence here, this is where to introduce the pedal, you see. Make sure you hold on to that, because if you don't, all you get is a D-flat, you see. So, change finger there, so you change pedal on that and leave it down. Leave it down until here. So the whole piano is saturated in that beautiful pedal D-flat chord. Now hold on to this, because we don't, having had this, you see, if you do this, you get a gap here. So you need to hold on to this. Still holding, you see. Hold on to this E flat here. Change pedal. Now, what you don't want to do is change pedal too much on these chords, on these measures. This one here, it really is high enough that you don't need to clear out. You don't need to clear out this. You don't have to go, because then you lose this. You see, you lose almost all of that. Much nicer to just leave everything in. Is it true of that? I think that does sound a little much, actually, because we've got a whole octave that doesn't belong to the chord. If you just gone, it might have been okay, but that does stick out rather if you just keep everything. So you have to do a nifty half pedal here, which means a very quick lifting of the pedal, like that, or it's not just the speed, it's the amount of pedal, it's the amount of lift you do on the pedal. If you just lift a tiny fraction, every pedal is different. You see, I'm clearing it out, clearing it out, clearing it out. So you can go, well, that's still sounding, but you've got rid of the E, because the E flat, because that's higher up in the piano. The strings are vibrating very much more quickly and much more closely. Whereas down here you've got the strings vibrating bigger and slower, and they take longer to damp out, you see. So you can hold on to this clear it out. It clears it out without clearing the whole thing out. If you clear the whole thing out, it sounds like this. All of this is gone. So you need to do a little bit of that. Just try to clear out some of it by just moving quickly a fraction of the amount up to the top of the pedal. You kind of need to know your piano, so it takes rehearsal if you're playing it on a piano you're not familiar with. And if you don't think the pedal will do that for you, you need to maybe just make an alternative decision about what to do there. I would prefer the whole thing to be held in pedal rather than, which is a bit dry. And then again here, hold on to the F. There again, I don't think you really need to change it because it's only single notes. There I think you do. Still I hear the B flat, but I've cleared out the E flat. I think when you've got two voices going, that's when you need to clear it out a little bit. And you don't need to clear the next one out. No, just leave it there. Then, tiny movement of the foot. Now, this next page, he marks tempo rubato. We have a different orchestration here. If you're thinking orchestrally, it suddenly moves up all the way to the top of the piano and the bottom of the piano at the same time, and the support is at the bottom of the piano. But I would say a silvery sound. Don't be thick. What we really need most of all is particularly kind of French sound where you've got the melody in the bottom and the top, and then the harmonies in between. Ravel loved that. He used it all the time. And here we have it in Debussy. Loud, don't get particularly fast. I mean, he does mark tempo rubato, but I think if you go like this, it sounds too much like a Rachmaninoff concerto. It should sound fairly cool, but very free and like blown by the breeze. Changing on almost all of those, half changing on all of those, and I can still hear this. And then finally it disappears, the bass does. And then here, and hold on to the chord while you change pedal here. By the way, talking about the fingering here, I would, in the left hand, start with 2 and 3 and 1, and here start with this, with a change of position here, and then go back, and really try and bring out the pinky, the lower part there. And here we have a build up now. He marks it, get louder and faster. Time that we actually can lift off at the end of the measure. So a little faster and a little louder, and the bass line should be quite obvious that it's really being the foundation of that movement, that crescendo, and then that being the peak. The fingerings here, I would say, the first one, try to finger this with a little connecting third finger there. The next one, just put these, take it all in one hand position, don't put thumbs where you don't need to. And this one, another connecting, that one's a little bit awkward, that last one. Try and get it all legato there, try not to do jumping, you see. Put a 2 up there and then change to. I like this fingering with 4 and 2 here. And then another 4 and 2 here. Don't spend too long here. It didn't actually mark writ here, you'd expect him to. It does need a writ, but not a huge one. Nice way of doing this, comfortable way, is instead of doing that with this stretch here. It's perfectly possible to do it that way, but you can also do it with the right hand. To pull back a little bit there because we've got a crescendo coming and an en animant, which means get livelier also, as well as louder. So pull back a little bit and keep all the way through this. The main thing is to keep the accompaniment soft, so it's not all of the almost featherweight. Particularly this wonderful part here. I like to just keep the pedal down for that entire measure. Lovely little echo there. Try and bring that out as well. So when we get to the en animant, just slightly tricky fingering here. Make sure that it's comfortable in the left hand. Good fingering for this. You're coming over in the left hand. You reach. Don't try and get another pinky there. It's quite nice to do this. And then land on a 3 there, and then change it. Sort of circular. So it's not all pinkies, which is very awkward to do all pinkies. Nice fat third finger here. Now here, of course, it sort of is a climax. It's just a beautiful shower of moonlight here. Maybe it's been drifting behind the clouds and then suddenly the full moon comes out. Slightly, well, there are different fingerings to do. I just like to do this kind of fingering here. And then the right hand. So far so good. Fairly standard fingering for thirds there. But here, you've got to sort of change your plan. I think you've got to, what they have here is, there's one way of doing it. I like just the one change of hand position rather than changing it here and then chaining it again. Just go to 2 and 1 here, leapfrog over to, and then you can hold on to that while you play the A. And you can even wait a little bit because this is a total change in harmony and mood. It's a new section of the piece leading to the coda here, you see. Calmato, calm. So calm in tempo and in dynamic. So what we got here is a little duet. And underneath you've got it's difficult to really bring those both out, but we need to try. It doesn't say do a crescendo there, but let's try it without. Keep the pedal down, long pedals, you see. Change. Don't change here. Change here. Now there was a place for a sort of half pedal. So we don't lose all of this. If we just go, it dries it out completely. But if you leave the pedal down all the way, I suppose it's acceptable. Change there, of course. I don't really like it. It's a bit too blurry. Experiment with the pedaling there. You can get away with a certain amount of blurriness because it's so high up in the piano. Let's see this one again. If you keep it moving, I think it's okay. Now here, we're in the final page. Half pedal. Half pedal here. Clearing out the E flats. Bit warmer here. And then fade away. And melt into this. Now I like to be able to hold everything in the pedal here. But I mean to change pedal, but hold everything from the left hand. So if you do this, and it sort of clears out, I think that's too clear. And he asks the left hand, this note to be held on all the way through. So this is a good way of doing it. You've got a nice harmony there instead of just an isolated chord. Very silvery here. Don't change the pedal. Once you've put it down on this, just keep it there. So that's Clair de Lune by Debussy. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please leave a like and share with whoever you think might be interested, and subscribe, please. That would be most helpful. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.